Welcome to Eternal in Nature, the podcast where we bridge the gap between the restored gospel and the principles of regenerative design, all to build the kingdom of God today. I'm your host, Joshua Prieto. We are currently in series 1 of Observe and Interact. These 14 days, we are slowing down to look at the patterns of the world and our faith so that we can design a future that is truly Zion. Let's dive into today's observation and begin to interact. Welcome back to Eternal in Nature. This is episode 5. We are going to be talking about bioregions. If you're unfamiliar with that term, no worries. It's going to be a fun one. Tune in. Let's kind of sit back, be prepared to dive deeply into something maybe you don't know or something maybe you can experience on a deeper level. As we really, the big thing that I'm trying to talk to here is that as a gospel that is global in the LDS religion, there is a very local presence to everything that we do, right? And I think we can all relate to the understanding of we are a worldwide church, but we really only have a influence or ability to control our local situation and to be a part of our local ward, stake, branch sometimes, right? Depending on where we're at. This is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And how do we build up the kingdom of God in a way that actually heals this specific area that we're in and the different things that God has given us for the surroundings that we have. Now, it was much easier to think about this, I think, when we weren't such a large global global nature. Like the world economy wasn't such a thing for us, and especially when we look at the pioneers that settled Salt Lake City, or we look at the early Americas and how things really just depended on the local community that you were building in and the resources that were available to you. Watersheds meant so much more when you actually had to irrigate your own ditches and those types of things, right? Being in a desert meant a lot more when you didn't have just fresh water that you could turn on your hose. These are the things that I think we kind of take for advantage of, but they are almost so much more important to understand and actually get our hands in the soil, figuratively and physically, right? That we really do dive into these questions. So yesterday we talked about the commons, the common structure, and how it is, if governed correctly, is a huge benefit to us in building up the kingdom of God and allowing for everybody to have the right for there to be no poor among us, right? And for everybody to be able to have their fair share, and for us to be able to responsibly steward the resources that that God has given us. And in a commons, we mentioned 3 things. What makes up a commons, right? A commons structure. One is God's gift, the resource that we're getting, right? And it could be many different things. It could be land-based things. It could be spiritual gifts that we hold in common together. It can, like the Book of Mormon is a common knowledge that we take together and we steward together, right? But it could be many different things, but it's the things that God gives us to hold in common with one another. That no one should have ownership over the specific resource than another, right? Everybody should be able to steward and govern it together. The internet is a commons, right? So we talked about those things, and then we talked that it has to be a community, and a very specific community that has different stakeholders and is understood. And then there's governance around that. So those are the three things that make up what a commons is. The laws that help us to govern the resources and the bodies that utilize those resources, the communities that utilize those resources. Now, what we're going to talk really about how we can think global and act bioregional when we're stewarding God's gifts, right? Those common gifts that he gives us. And the best way to look at this for me is to look at the physical, tangible gifts that we're given: water, land, air, beautiful scenery, and all of these food, all of these different things that God gives us, and it really should be held in commons with one another. And that no one should go without, essentially, but we should all take responsibility for making sure that we all have a fair share and that future generations have that as well. So that's where we're at today in this conversation. I'm excited to dive into it, and I'm going to use some different tools here. Really, the concept that we're trying to really focus in. Remember that the church is global, but we don't live in a global place. We live in a specific bioregion. No matter how much, how interconnected we are these days across the entire world, and it seems like our world is getting smaller and smaller, we are still very place-based people. And specific bioregions, those are the barrier. Humans have created all of these different political boundaries, but God has given these certain boundaries that are bioregional that actually we should be more aware of, because that's what allows us to understand and govern the natural resources that God gives us. So we're going to talk about defining what a bioregion is. We're going to use the One Earth framework and kind of share that, because it actually shows us it shows a better view of how God has defined the lines through flora, fauna, water and climate, rather than our man-made political boundaries defined by city lines and those types of things, right? Those matter, and we have to consider those, because those are the communities essentially that are in the commons that help us to govern together, and we have to value all the stakeholders within those. But we gotta also we often overlook the bioregional boundaries, and that's really where God has given us the lines and helped us to determine how we can manage the resources, especially in with the knowledge that we have these days. There's no reason why we can't bioregionally steward our areas of life, and especially as a global church that is all over the world, but is very much governed locally by the branches and wards and so forth and so on. This is an important consideration for us to build up the kingdom of God. So the why really that I'm wanting to hit on here is that we are going to be governing a commons. I highly suggest you listen to episode 4 without respecting the bioregion, and typically that's happened in our present day, right? The modern world that we live in has neglected this part, and if we don't do this, if we don't govern our commons with the respect of a bioregion that we're in, we fall back into that tragedy of the commons that I had mentioned in episode 4, where Zion looks different, in a rainforest than it does in a desert. It's the same Zion, right? But we are having different gifts given to us in that region that we have been given. We have different talents, right? That the Lord has given it for us to steward. And if we just bury it in the ground, it's not going to serve anyone. And in reality, the Lord is going to chastise us in the long game for this, right? We have to take what we've been given and turn it into greater fruit. That's really what we're talking about here. And I'm going to do this in three different a case study framework where we observe and interact. Going back to another previous episode that we did this week, I believe in episode 2, we talked about the permaculture principles. And the first principle is observe and interact in permaculture, which is a design philosophy that we can use to help us design our systems in alignment with God's natural systems that he's created for us on this earth. So the tool today we'll be using is One Earth. And I'm going to pull that up right now to kind of show you it, because it's kind of a fun little thing to play around with. And I'll add this to our resources so you can get this in the description wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Spotify or you're pulling this up on YouTube. It'll be in the description below. The pieces that I'm also going to bring into here is I want to help us to have that LDS overlay and explain, our human boundaries that we have made through our own church wards and stakes and the cities that we live in. Those and the watersheds are the more overlay on how we've actually utilized natural resources in those areas as well. These are all different overlays to the map that we're trying to look at in a holistic way as we observe and interact with the bioregions that we're currently in. So this is a permaculture lens. So as we do this observation and interaction today, usually we take, they say to take at least a year before you actually design something in any way. If it's a physical design of like land, like your property, or a watershed or something of that nature, you typically take at least a year to see some seasonality, see some different patterns that you wouldn't get if you were just going to study for a month or so, right? So that's putting it into perspective. We're kind of condensing this understanding, this framework. We're observing and interacting today using some tools, but we're supposed to do this over some time, and then we're supposed to see the patterns that exist. And another permaculture design principle is that we design from patterns to details. So once we start to recognize those patterns, we can actually start to design from those patterns to create the details that we want within our design construct. And we'll get into some of the possible details. We won't create any details or design anything, but we can kind of get a sense of this pattern of observing and interacting, recognizing patterns, being able to design from those patterns and create the details that we need within our systems and structures to create tangible things that build up the kingdom of God, help us to do to fairly distribute the resources that God has given us within the common structure. Okay. Hey, quick break. If you're listening to these episodes and feeling that spark to get something done, I want to invite you into the Eternal in Nature Telegram community. This isn't just a place to get updates. It's our sandbox where we start to use the principles from these episodes and discuss how to apply them in our wards, our gardens, our businesses. And if Telegram isn't your thing, start the conversation here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this. I read every single comment that comes in through these many different channels, and that's where we start recommenting, is in our communities, in our conversations and discussions. So check the link out below and join the conversation. Let's pull this up because I'm really excited about this. Let's just play around with this tool for a moment, because I have, let's see, let me share my screen. I have One Earth pulled up, and I'm going to share this specific page because it will give you a deeper context if you want to dive in. But this is the One Earth Bioregions framework. They've done a beautiful job. They have a bunch of scientists and a bunch of researchers that have developed a understanding of a framework of what, I would call it God's boundaries, But the natural boundaries that the world has um, set based upon the ecology of our world, right? Um, so it tells you about what is a bioregion. We have different biomes. There's deserts, mountains, the grasslands, tundras, the tropical areas, right? We learn this in science. But as we start to recognize these, there are different areas in the world that, as you take these different biomes, they are unique to any other place in the world, right? And that's basically what we're saying. So I'm going to give you this as a reference in the description below, so you can kind of read through some of these frameworks and how this came to be. But basically, they created a navigator, a map that shows you the work that they've done to really figure out the boundaries God has given us here on this planet, with and especially in this this period of the planet that we live in. Because obviously these boundaries have changed over time and whatnot, but these are pretty consistent for hundreds, thousands of years, right? So this is what you would look at a map if it was God's boundaries that he's defined, right? Not human boundaries with cities and whatnot. Do you know where Utah is in this area, right? It's actually in between these two right here. It's in between the what is this? The Colorado Plateau, right? And the Great Basin and Columbia Steep, right? And you actually see this. This is very interesting here. You have the Wasatch Mountains and the Rocky Mountains kind of coming down through here in this area, and it's an edge. And we've talked about edges. We want to use and value edges. So you can see Utah, even on the Salt Lake area here, is right on an edge. Salt Lake City is on this edge, and there's lots of diversity and growth and potential when we look at edges. So it's a really interesting way of looking at this. If we look at the boundaries that we actually exist on, and then culturally, what are some of the boundaries that we have here? We have Salt Lake City. Nothing really exists. Boundary. We have Salt Lake City as far as city goes. We have some different counties that are very rural, and we have some smaller cities down over here, right? St. George and Moab and so forth. And we have our Utah boundary here that's governed politically. And then we butt up, but this specific region, bioregion, actually includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states, a little bit of California, right, as well. And it's really fascinating because we have to work with all 5 of those states to manage the resources that God naturally gives in this bioregion. And then also we have to manage another bioregion that's next to it, which is the Great Plains of, let's go back this up a bit. The Colorado Plateau, and the mountain forests, right? So this is another one that kind of goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states. So as we talk about this, I want to really share, and I have to bring up my notes to do this as well. I'll bring them over here so I can read while I also show this for you. I want to give a better understanding and do a case study on 3 different bioregions. One is the Salt Lake City, the Great Basin area, Salt Lake Valley, and I'll include the Colorado Plateau in this conversation as well, because we are on an edge in the Salt Lake Valley area and the Great Basin that we exist. But for context, I am going to kind of keep it kind of politically centered around the Salt Lake area. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the Great Plains, kind of heartland of the U.S., And specifically, something that's probably near and dear more to the LDS faith is potentially where Zion's going to be. If I zoom out here in Independence, Missouri, we have a bunch of land there, and supposedly going to be stewarding much of what's happening. I think it's not the Ozarks. It's the Midwestern tallgrass prairie forest area, right? This is, you click on here, you can see Independence, Missouri is bring this out a little bit more. I think right around here somewhere, right? And so this again has this bioregional resources dependent in this bioregion, which comes with a whole different region of challenges and other things, and different watersheds that are coming out from the Great Lakes, and so forth and so on, and we manage this area much more differently than we would manage the areas in its neighboring Colorado Plateau, or the Great Basin, Columbia area, where Salt Lake City is largely located, right? And then third, just because it looks completely different, and I live over this way as well, I want to introduce a little bit of what happens on another part of the world, especially in the southern hemisphere. I'm in this region. I'm in the Andean mountain forests and valleys, and I'm up at the very north in Colombia, in Bogota, in this area, right around this area, and it butts up into lots of very biodiverse areas. The central Amazon forest. We have a dry forest here, and we can get into what a dry forest does. Next to more dense rainforests, and then this isthmus here, which is Panama, and parts of Colombia on the Pacific side, and a little bit of the Caribbean, is probably one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. This area of the world gets managed so much more differently with God's resources than anywhere else in the world as well. And if you look out, and I zoom out globally, you can see that we have unique areas all across the world, and they need different care and stewardship in general, right? Okay, so let's dive into this first area, because I lived most of my life in this little area in the Wasatch, butting up against the Wasatch Mountains and this Great Basin here, right? Beautiful expanses. So much. The mountains are gorgeous. The desert is intense and gorgeous as well. And there's a lot of different. This is the Great Basin shrub steppe, is the eco region, the even smaller region within here. You can see outlined here, and then in 2, and then there's these jutting little mountainous areas that are a little different in that space as well, that we call the Great Basin montane forest, and they're their own unique eco region that you can say has its unique care as well. So let's dive a little bit into how our observation and interaction of this area looks like. If I go to the top here, and I'm seeing, if anybody's familiar with how the water system works across the Salt Lake, we have these 2 very unique lakes really close to each other right here, right? And we get this what we call the lake effect that butts up against the mountains, and it hits these mountains, and we get this very unique edge along this area that builds up a lot of snow on the peaks, and it creates a huge resource of water for an entire deserty area here, and even down through here into these bioregions and into California now, as we we have these huge reservoirs on the edge of Utah and Nevada, right? And so this is important to consider, because this little area here and this mountain range here affects so much of these huge wide expanses of land and desert, in so many ways. So that's one observation that we should make here. We also got to make some observations here that we also have another mountain range on here, on the other side over here. That's the Ochre Mountain Range, and we sit in this valley, and there's lots of air pollution that comes through this area, because it gets caught up in this space, and it can really hurt the health conditions for humans in this space, and other animals as well. But also there's the interesting fact that we have the storm systems that will come in here. This area, there's actually, you can kind of see this here. This is a kind of a raised mountainous area. These two areas, right? These are essentially the Ochre Mountain ranges. And there's a small little, the rain will kind of get caught up in this range here, but it doesn't give a lot of rain on this side, but then we get a ton of rain on the Wasatch, right? And so we need to manage those things very in a very interesting way. If you've noticed, just in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, we've been getting these brown snowstorms, and they're actually, it means quite a bit that we're getting these kind of dust. They get dust inside of them, right? And this is happening not just in this area, but all along the Rocky Mountains across here. We're seeing this challenge where we're getting all of these rainstorms butting up into here, and they land. So if we look at this other side, they're landing against this range, this green spot right here. And if we get a lot of the dust that will come from the desert over here into these things, it melts that snow so much quicker, and it doesn't keep it seeping into our watersheds. So that's an important observation to make within this bioregion. That is a pattern that really shows, in so many ways, we're a high desert, right? We have these very terminal lakes, the Great Salt Lake, and extreme water scarcity. And it actually impacts all of this entire region when we have a bad winter, or we have snow melt that comes in too quickly, or we have way too much of it, right? And it just doesn't know where to take it, and we get flash floods and those types of things, right? These challenges can be managed and designed through just smaller uses and other ways to be more resilient in our communities. The way that we allow for flash floods, or we have rainwater gardens. That's when rain comes in, we have ways of getting that water to not just get caught up in different roads and in different things, but actually to seep into the soil and build our aquifers up, right? Those are things that we can design easily. And we have to understand and observe and interact with the certain situations, and we have to do our part, even with our limited ability to influence those things. If we have a bit of land, we probably have a little bit more influence. If we're living in the city, we probably have less influence, but we can still do a number of different things, like community gardening, or building pollinator gardens, or advocating for different ways of doing rainwater gardens in the cities, especially, so that water just doesn't go into and quickly get out of the city. And this happens in big cities, especially as the Salt Lake City grows, where it's going to go to like the Jordan River, right? In Salt Lake City. It's going to go to some of the other areas. If that gets flooded, it can flood a bunch of different soil. It can take it from crops as well that are along this area as well. And we have to do our job to understand what our impact is in the way that we're living in our areas. So we're observing, interacting with these. We're recognizing the patterns that we exist in. And we're also understanding the patterns culturally that we have. We have a pattern of lawn obsession in this very scarce region of water, where we water our lawns, we put pesticides and fertilizers on lawns. And in deserts, when it rains hard, and that runoff of all the different chemicals and all the different things that we're adding to our lawns goes into our water system and water supplies as well. And that gets carried downstream. We have to understand that when we make choices like that as well. And this is a drying up lake. I don't know how many of you know how limited the Salt Lake City is. It's not a very deep lake. It is very expansive, but the farming even in Idaho and farming even in a lot of these areas matters a lot. Just the last, I think it was like 4 years ago or something, the church said that they will start releasing more from their farms, releasing more water downstream to help fill up the Great Salt Lake. It was one of their contributions. And it was a huge choice because they own so much land up in these areas that drain into the Salt Lake. The bigger the Salt Lake is, the better the water system we have here with these two lakes, building out the lake effect that gets when a storm comes in, it cycles here for a little bit. You might get 2 or 3 cycles on the lake effect that build up and create these wonderful ski seasons that we get. I'm a huge skier. I grew up skiing, raced. I want to see those mountains. That affects our tourism. That affects so many our economy that way, right? And it really does depend on how we are valuing the water upstream and downstream, and everything that we do to suck up the water that is coming, because this is mostly upstream. It's actually coming from the lakes and reservoirs above in Idaho and so forth, and Wyoming, Montana, right? So we have to be considerate upstream, and we have to be talking with our neighbors and to understand that it affects these areas as well. And then, so if I go back in and out here, we want to make sure that because we sit on these edges, culturally, we think of what we're doing to bring up the level of the Great Salt Lake and Utah Lake and the lakes in Utah, because they really do matter to our water system. And that matters a ton downstream, as we have the Hoover Dam, the reservoir there, Lake Mead, and those are drying up as well. And that feeds a lot of the water in California, Nevada, Arizona regions, right? So we also have this water commons that we are protecting. And if we kind of get into some of the possible solutions that we can do on a micro scale and a macro scale within our wards, within our cities and our counties and our stakes, it's a matter of what can we do just with our church building, right? Are we feeding a giant lawn? Are we landscaping that? And are we landscaping our suburban, urban landscapes as well, so that it benefits the bioregion, rather than designing it for a Kentucky bluegrass, which is meant for Kentucky, right? Which is meant for tall grass areas or short grass areas for the Midwest. We should probably be reconsidering how we landscape, the different chemicals that we use for our landscaping as well, because it affects us all. It affects those resources, and it really starts to affect a lot of our rural areas, as well as we see global warming and climate changing over the years. We can get into global warming. I think more importantly, it's about how we're valuing our resources. Because if we value our resources um, more effectively as stewards, and make ways, global warming and climate is not going to affect us. We're going to build more resiliency through all of those ways, right? So here we have, different possible designs that we can do. I'm not saying that we do this. We all need to do our observation interaction and start diving in before we do our designs. But these are some different things. Replacing, the green turf that we have. When I just got my parents to do this, there is a less water intensive. It's actually clover, right? Clover is such a good. It's a nitrogen fixer, so it brings nitrogen to our soils. It can often be used for pollinators. When you have instead of having a Kentucky bluegrass lawn, you can change it over to clover, or even a mixture of grass and clover, and it grows flowers during the summer months as well. And bees will come in, and you'll bring in pollinators. You have your garden, they love it. My parents put in Kentucky, or replaced their Kentucky bluegrass with clover in the backyard, and when they did that, they had their kitchen garden outside with their seasonal garden. Your pumpkin, your lettuce and cabbage and all of that, right? They had that growing, and they received such a larger fruiting of their plants in their garden, because they had a lot more pollinators, right? So these are benefiting benefits that come really naturally, and they don't have to put down a lot of fertilizer. I told them to not do fertilizer. They've had a hard time getting away from their chemical dependencies, fertilizer and pesticides, but they don't have to do that anymore, because also it's a huge nitrogen fixer. So it brings in nitrogen, which is the main nutrient that you're getting from these fertilizers that you're throwing on your lawn. So it stays green. It doesn't, and it requires less water. These are choices that we can make. These are design choices that we can make with our ward stakes, our own landscapes, right? And then water catchment hubs are really great. We call in the permaculture realm, we call them stormwater gardens, where you build out these really great ways of funneling water into areas with trees and different plants that soak up and help the water to sink in to the area instead of running off really quickly. Because as you see in cities, especially, you see all that water running off. That immense amount of water goes somewhere, and usually it goes into farmlands, it goes into other areas, and too much water in an area will erode soil, healthy soils all over the place. So we have to consider these things. So a valley where the saints are is a primary reason the Great Salt Lake is refilling, because we do try to take those considerations in our communities. The church does understand the benefits of the Great Salt Lake and the challenges that we have in our climate right now, with the Great Salt Lake drying up, and so we want to be the best stewards. I know that we can, and especially since there's a great population of saints here, we can make a really strong difference. I'm taking a while on this, but I really want to put home the thought here for the Salt Lake area. I'll go over the other two case studies more quickly, but I wanted to spend more time because this is where the greatest amount of Zion has gathered. is in this area, right? And I want to show you just the ways that we can consider our the regions God has given us and how we can better steward them. Now, if we go over to the Midwestern tallgrass prairie and forest region, here we're talking about this little area is where kind of Independence and Kansas City is in this area too, right? There's a lot of church land here that potentially is supposed to be, where Zion gathers in the last days, and there's a lot of great pieces to consider in this area as well, where most of this is tallgrass prairie. And the thing about tallgrass prairie and the challenges that we have, you can even just see in this picture, it's butting up against, farmland over here. We have which is a monocrop. We have roads, different hills, some shrubs and trees and those types of things. The big thing with tallgrass, it's a huge carbon sequester. So it takes the carbon in the atmosphere and it puts it into the soil. And those roots of the tallgrass go super, super deep, and they take they sequester carbon, but they also take a lot of the water that falls and put it deep into the soil, and it creates these beautiful biodiverse soils, deep, rich soils that are fertilized by large grazing mammals that we've actually killed off in our history in the States, right? Most of this was like bison country all the way through these areas here, right? And that part of the ecosystem was totally necessary, and we changed it for monocrops that are largely feeding grazing large mammals, right? So we've displaced our mammals that used to roam across the plains, the Great Plains, and fertilize the tall grasses and enrich the soil in so many ways. And now we put them in cattle feed lots and whatnot. This is where we can grow most of the meat that we so love to eat, right? It's the cows and whatnot. We just need to manage the land better because we need those large mammals to be able to manage these grassland prairies. And in order to do that, they need to be able to roam across these lands in healthy ways. And there's regenerative grassland management practices that we've learned how to utilize. And this is a resource that is we can have very easily another Dust Bowl in the Midwest if we continue down the same path of these monocrops, because those monocrops, we till them the land sits bare, gets rained on, and that water and the good rich soil that was covered by these tall grasses is then washed away, and you can't even grow the grasses anymore until you rest them for decades, right? This is a challenge that we've had in the Midwest for several decades because of our agricultural practices that have created Dust Bowls, and we're about to create another Dust Bowl if you haven't been paying attention to what's happening here. If we aren't going to manage these lands properly and teach ourselves and others better grassland management practices to build the rich soils back in and to bring in large grazing mammals into the ecosystem again, that can feed us as well, right? And give us great nutrients for the land and surrounding areas. So I just wanted to mention, some of the observations here, and then some of the solutions that can come into our communities if we are smart enough to recognize these. And it comes down to managing the soils and the seeds, the grassland seeds, bringing the biodiversity of those rich different grasses in this area. the interdependence that we have in creating this regional food web um, really is quite amazing if you think about it. We talk about um, the challenges with meat these days, but there is enough reason to ethically grow and raise, I should say, raise our meat and cattle still on this earth, and we need to for the grasslands and mid management. Now, I would say if we come down and we do the same thing all the way here, and which is happening in Panama and Costa Rica, in this isthmus area here in the Central Americas, and in Mexico, where we have rainforest, and in the Amazon, we're gonna shoot ourselves in the foot if I go and put cattle on this land. We're burning out the cattle, and that's why I want to come down into how we can manage these areas, right? Um, the northern Andean areas, beautiful areas. We get so much rain here. It's gorgeous to consider the biodiversity here. When I lived in Panama, it was even more profound because I was, in this isthmus area that connects two continents together, and it's regarded as the most biodiverse area in the world, and it needs to be protected because that biodiversity is what brings us the different ranges of life that we have on this planet, and the security that comes with the resiliency, I should say, that comes with that biodiversity. The amount of bugs that we have, the amount of birds that we have, the range of plants and medicines, and all of these different things that come from our rainforest, let alone the weather patterns that if we were to get rid of the Amazon, for example, and the Amazon is being depleted, we would actually desertify and disrupt. We would see way harsher hurricane seasons for the Caribbean. We would see patterns in desertification increase intensely for the Great Plains because of a lot of our water that comes from hurricane season, those types of things that bring in different systems and structures for the Americas. We would see greater desertification in grasslands and in desert areas, greater challenges as well, would be affected just by the reduction of the Amazon or the removal of the Amazon. And that largely exists because of the ability to have biodiversity, different plants, different animals, working in diverse ecosystems to create what we have. So as we're observing this in observing the patterns here in this part of the world, it comes down a lot to how the U.S. especially is extracting and exploiting the resources here, and the northern, I would say, Canada is also exploiting quite a bit. Europe is exploiting quite a bit of resources here. Monocrops in coffee and cacao, our chocolates and our bananas, and all of these different things that we take advantage of in the States directly come from this very biodiverse area, and those resources are not being regenerated, but being extracted and exploited over time, where we get less and less, and the nutrient level goes down and down with the monocrops that we are currently throwing plenty of pesticide and fertilizers into the coffee, into the chocolate, into the bananas and papaya and everything that we're getting from the pineapples, everything, right? This is a challenge because that extraction, and this is also mineral rich. You talk about Venezuela, the Venezuelan coast. Oh, super tons of minerals here, but also some of the most biodiverse area in the world is the Venezuelan coast as well, and lots of great rainforest and dry forests here. And we need this type of work. Some things can only grow in dry forest. When you think of rainforest, it's just like I was saying up in the mountains. When we observe how the mountains work in this region here, we have rain coming here. On the other side, you have a rain hits, and then on the other side, it's a desert, essentially, usually, right? Because you get all the rain on one side, and then you have what you call a rain shadow on the other side of that mountain, and it creates deserts in a different bioregion in itself, right? That happens also in rainforest. So you typically get a lot of rainforest, right, in these areas, and then you'll have dry forest. Panama, for example, most of the isthmus here in Panama is deep rainforest and cloud forests in higher elevations, and then you have these beautiful. Are we still Colombia here? I'm a little turned around on this. Here, this is how I can do it. Yeah. So in this area, on the Pacific side, we have dry forests. On the Caribbean side, we have our rainforests, right? And people would consider it all rainforest, but it's that same thing. A lot of the storms will come in, hit the rainforest, and it stays rainy all year round. All year round, it's raining nonstop pretty much on the Caribbean side of this isthmus, right? And then on the other side of this is what we call the dry forest, where it has a seasonality to it. You have a rainy season and a dry season, right? And that happens in most of Latin America. And we have a huge, but if you shrink this, like if you start to increase this dry forest, and it only becomes only dry forest, it actually just kills off the forest entirely, because the dry season will become longer and longer, and it'll eat into the different areas around it and turn into, because they're still getting lots of water during the other halves of the season in these areas, right? The challenge is you're just going to create desertification. It'll do a reverse from rainforest. It'll go into savanna, and from savanna, it'll go into, grasslands, and it'll start to desertify, right? And this will become larger and larger and will reduce a lot of the rainforest. And that will change the world's water structure, right? And the patterns that we see across the world for rain, just by changing this area. So our use of how we utilize bananas even affects this area, right? How we get our products like cacao, coffee, all, your chocolate that's in your pantries, all of that affects this area, and we have to make smarter choices around that as well. And even though it's in a different bioregion entirely, the way I'm trying to help to manage this area is still hindered by how people living in these areas and these areas up here are influencing and extracting and exploiting from this area. We don't see that. You don't really recognize it in the States. I didn't really understand it in the States until I started observing and interacting with Central and South America and the cultures here. We don't recognize it, but we are supposed to be stewarding this, and this is creating immense challenges, climate challenges, and economic challenges for the entire region. Just I don't want to get political on this show, but if we're to talk even about how the U.S. is currently influencing Venezuela and the Caribbean right now, and politically upturning and that exploitation extraction for the benefit of the states, and is, you may say it's helping them politically in Venezuela right now. Take another look at deeply and try to observe and interact with what's really going on, because it's more complex than the geopolitical landscape that's happening, and we have to consider the bioregional in those things, the resources that are being extracted and exploited from, how they're being governed, and all of those things have to be considered. It's much more complex. So our design in those types of areas, for me, I'm thinking more global as I'm talking to you about this region, because how the general north has affected this the Central and Southern Americas in particular, it's very similar on the other side of the continent too. If you talk about Europe and Africa and India, those patterns have existed culturally for centuries now, in the extraction and exploitation of regions. And it disallows these areas to manage their resources effectively, because they will know how to better manage them because they live there and will have a better ability to do so. Someone over on the other side of the world just knows how to consume and extract from something on the other side of the world. That's you don't know how to manage it. You won't ever know how to manage it unless you come and live in that area. And so we look towards the people that live there and have them take responsibility and allow them to be responsible in ways, and give them the correct ways and help them to learn the correct ways if they don't know the correct ways to manage these lands. But in many ways, they already know. There's many indigenous cultures in Venezuela. They're not related to the government that's currently running Venezuela, but they're not the ones managing the resources either. So you got to understand that the governments also have been radicalized, and has made it harder for them to govern their resources, because they've been radicalized by challenges in with relations, global political relations in these areas, especially the Caribbean at this moment. It's a very difficult, more complex than I think anybody can actually understand. So I am getting down a rabbit hole that I didn't expect to go down, but I wanted to really show our impact as we look at this globally, and getting back into our understanding of our faith and how we can make a difference as Latter-day Saints. It is why I created this channel. As we look to obey the law of consecration, it means that we make better choices in our lives to manage these resources and allow for the communities and cultures across the world, and especially our Latter-day Saint communities that are trying to do their own part in their own regions to live the law of consecration in their own way, in their own bioregions. Now, let's see. There was a couple of things right before we end this podcast episode. I do want to kind of synthesize this into a call to action, and maybe just your own observation and interaction in beginning your learning process. There is lots and lots of great resources around this. I would choose to start by doing a little bit of a read on the One Earth Bioregions framework. If you're into this type of work, this will kind of teach you, some things that you may have learned in the past, but it kind of brings it to the forefront of your mind. And you can start to recognize the patterns that are existing in our world right now, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of it. But the natural patterns, the things that are eternal in nature that God has given us to steward over, are what really matters here, and what we need to protect and enable. And God's creations are definitely a part of that here on our earth. This is one of the ways that we can do that, is by understanding, observing, and interacting with our bioregions, understanding the patterns, and designing from those patterns to create details that help to protect and enable the things that we hold in common, the common resources that lift each other out of poverty, that keep us in abundance with one another and in relation with one another. Our food, our water, our air that we breathe, all of this is directly asked of you to steward. And if you don't think so, pray about it. I've done my share of praying about how I might be able to make small and simple solutions for my own area where I live. I know that you can do the same. So it starts by learning as well. So if you can find your own bioregion where you're at, I mentioned just a few cases here while looking through the navigator. Find your bioregion on One Earth. Start asking some questions of yourself. Does your ward have a certain plan around gardening, or do we waste a lot of water in our own backyard? Does our community have any thought of sharing seeds, or creating a common a commons for different resources that you can utilize together to manage your bioregion? These are all questions that I hope you start to ask. And so we've seen the where, and how, the how is still formalizing, I hope, for you, as I've been going through the last 5 days within this series. We are kind of in a 2-week series. This is the exploratory learning series of how we can actually, or what it is that we can govern those things, what are eternal in nature, and how we can manage those things that are eternal in nature to build up the law of, to obey the law of consecration here on the earth, and bring in the kingdom of God in these latter days. Now, as we start to wrap up the last week, every Sunday I'm going to do more of like a more religious, diving into the doctrine around these principles of the law of consecration specifically, right? And building up the kingdom of God. There's some really great scriptures that I'm kind of diving into, and so tomorrow we are going to start talking about specifically the scriptures in D&C that talk about how the church was governed in those early days around these temporal things, right? So we'll dive into it. It's really fascinating. And it's also very interesting that we had to move away from that, because I don't think that we were quite ready to govern in the way that the Lord was wanting us to in that period of time. And we had to learn, I think, the hard way in many ways through the growth of industry across the states, and it took us time to understand the value and science to kind of catch up with a lot of these principles as well, and understandings. But we'll talk about this tomorrow. It's blowing my mind that we were already sophisticated, doing very sophisticated commons governance early on in the church. And we'll talk about that tomorrow in the D&C scriptures that we're going to bring up. So that's your tease for tomorrow. Tune in. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this. Share in the comments what you're getting out of this. Start a conversation with me and with others. Let's start building out how we're actually doing this together. And it really starts with your observation and interaction with the material that we're presenting here in these 2 weeks. So excited for tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me for another episode in the Observe and Interact series. If this sparks something within you, hit the like button. It really tells me and the algorithm that this is a conversation that matters. Also, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Each episode in this series will be released daily at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So let's keep our focus on the things that are eternal in nature.